Hello, thank you for watching this first video in our series explaining satisfactory academic progress, as we look at the requirements and procedures that students face when dealing with SAP issues. This first video will go in depth in the different requirements that students must meet in order to maintain good academic standing for financial aid, as well as some of the communications and a couple scenarios related to those requirements. Satisfactory academic progress is commonly referred to as SAP, and we'll call it SAP throughout the rest of the video. SAP is how financial aid uses regulations from the government to determine if students can continue getting financial aid. Students must maintain good standing in order to continue receiving their financial aid, or else they'll be unable to receive financial aid in the future. For students to remain in good standing, they must meet 3 metrics. These metrics are to maintain a minimum 2.0 cumulative grade point average, to successfully complete at least 67% of the credit hours attempted, and they must finish their academic program before attempting more than 150% of the credit hours required to complete the declared degree, diploma, or certificate program that the student is enrolled in. Now, meeting that minimum 2.0 grade point average is pretty self-explanatory, but we want to take a further look into the completion rate. So the minimum percentage of work a student must successfully complete by the end of each semester that they're enrolled is 67% of all attempted hours. When we say successfully complete, that means the student has earned a passing grade in the class, either an A, B, C, D, or P grade at Gateway. The 67% includes all attempted hours. This includes classes that were taken and withdrawn or taken and failed. For example, if a student takes 24 credit hours over 2 semesters, that student must successfully complete at least 16 of those credit hours in order to stay in good financial aid standing. To get that completion percentage, students can take the total hours they've successfully completed, again, the classes that they've passed, and divide that number by the total number of credit hours they've attempted and multiply by 100 to get that percentage. In the example that we mentioned before, 16 divided by 24 equals 0.66, times that by 100, 66.6%, we round that up and that's 67%. Again, students must successfully complete at least 67% of their courses in order to stay in good standing for SAP. The other requirement we want to take a look at is called maximum time frame. As we mentioned earlier, this is the requirement that students must complete their declared program within 150% of the credit hours needed for that declared program. We're going to look here at an associate's degree. Commonly, associate degrees require 60 credit hours. So for maximum time frame, that means a student has to complete that degree within 90 credit hours attempted. Essentially, the student only gets 90 credit hours to pass 60 and get that associate's degree. That 90 attempted hours, just like with the completion rate, includes all classes that were attempted. It includes failed classes, withdrawn classes, but also courses that were transferred in. So if a student transfers 40 credit hours from another school, that also gets added to their total attempted hours allowed for their degree. Sometimes students who have transferred a lot of credit hours in and maybe coming to Gateway for a new degree come up with this situation where they must submit an appeal, which we'll talk about in the other videos, in order to continue getting financial aid because they've transferred so many hours in. Let's take a look at a couple scenarios. First scenario, a student who has attempted, or rather who has an academic program of associate in science degree. The associate in science degree is allotted 90 credit hours to complete the 60 credit hour program. Like we were just saying, 90 credit hours is 150% of 60 credits. So a student can get 90 credit hours of attempted courses for that associate in science degree. That student attempted 50 hours at Gateway and has transferred in 41 hours from Northern. They have a 3.4 GPA and successfully completed 80% of their Gateway classes. Do they need to complete a SAP appeal? The answer is yes. Even though the GPA is good and the completion rate is good, because that student has transferred in 41 hours and attempted 50 hours, they are over that 90 credit hour limit. Again, we will talk about the process of a SAP appeal in the other videos, but that's what a student will be required to do if they fail to meet one of these requirements for SAP. In this case, they failed to meet the maximum time frame requirement because of all the hours that they've done, and they'll have to complete a SAP appeal in order to continue getting financial aid. One more scenario. A student takes 4 classes in the fall, receiving 3 E grades, which is a failing grade, and they withdrew from the 4th class. The student returns 2 years later and takes 3 classes, making an A in all 3, including 2 classes that were repeated from the earlier semester. Their GPA is now 3.0. Do they need to complete a SAP appeal? The answer is yes. Even though that GPA is in good shape, and even though the student retook some classes from that first semester, the student has still attempted 21 total credit hours, but only successfully completed 9, which are those 3 in the most recent semester. That's a 43% completion rate. Because that completion rate is below 67, they fail to meet that SAP requirement and would be required to submit an appeal to continue getting financial aid. Lastly, we want to take a look here at some of the communications that students receive related to SAP. At the end of each semester that a student is enrolled, they will receive an email communication with their SAP status. Those statuses are either going to say that a student is meets, which means they're in good standing. A student is warning, which means that's their first semester where the student has not met the SAP requirements, or the student has been suspended, which means it's now their second consecutive semester of not meeting SAP requirements. A warning is just what it says. It's a warning. Students can continue getting financial aid, but they must do better in order to get off of that SAP warning status, or else they will be moved to suspended. When a student is marked SAP suspended, they are no longer eligible to receive financial aid. They can continue enrolling in classes, but no eligibility for financial aid unless they submit an appeal and it's approved. In that case, a student who is SAP suspended will receive a communication by the system office to notify the student that they have been suspended and what their next steps are. Once the student has submitted an online SAP appeal, which again, please watch our other video to explain the in-depth process of what a student has to do to submit that appeal, an email will be sent by the Gateway Financial Aid staff alerting the student of what, if any, documentation is needed for that appeal to be read by the committee. Once that documentation has been submitted and the committee has made its decision, an approval or denial letter will be sent by the student, or sent to the student rather, by the financial aid staff, letting them know what that decision is. So that's just a quick overview on the different requirements that a student must meet in order to stay in good financial aid standing, as well as some scenarios and the communications that students will receive. Hope you found this video helpful, and again, please watch our other videos in this series to learn more about SAP and the process and requirements here at Gateway. Thanks.